Hey, welcome to BW. So this is a video that I'm just gonna answer a bunch of questions. I had the opportunity to actually have a conversation and give a presentation at the University of San Francisco. And this is going to be an excerpt of those questions. So if you're interested in asking me a question, or if you're interested in just finding out more about my background, you can either do one of two things. You can either leave a comment below and ask it directly on this video, or you can head over to my GitHub repo, which is bdougie/AMA, and feel free to open up an issue and ask me a question there. For the sake of not needing to dodge questions that I know I've already answered in some other form. But if you made it here to this channel and you're interested in learning things like developer automation, or learning how to sort of break into your developer career and sort of grow, feel free to hit the subscribe button. Likes on the video too, or I think they're helpful. I'm not really sure. I haven't really broke into the YouTube algorithm yet. And also I'm going to shout out that, actually I mentioned my Twitter at every video. I don't actually have to say that I have a Twitter and you should follow it, because you're probably going to get there. Link in the description below. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into these questions. Again, these questions are going to be focused around folks who want to learn about how to break into the career. These are all college students that ask these questions, so it's going to have that sort of lens to it as well. So I hope you get some value out of that. And here we go. So first question, how has your self-created blog helped to share your journey, and how has it helped in reflecting your accomplishments? That's a nice underhanded pitch. And I really respect these college students. They actually put some thought into these questions as well. But I have a self-created blog. I've got a couple actually. So I got briandouglas.me, and that's been the place I've been doing most of my technical content up until January of this year. I've got really sidetracked from that. I've got BW Live, which is not a blog. It's a place I sort of host my streams, my Twitch stream, live stream every Tuesday and Thursday. And then I have my very first blog, and I think this is the blog they're actually referencing, because this is the one I reference in my Code Newbies episode. I was in the Code Newbies podcast, episode number 2. So definitely check it out. I'll leave a link in the description below for that podcast. That podcast will answer a lot of these questions aside from the GitHub one. But this is a blog that I use to set the stage for my learning. When I first got into programming back in 2013, I actually tried programming quite a few times before that. In middle school, I used to build like GeoCities. In high school, I had a web design course, I guess is what they called it, web development. So we did Dreamweaver, we did some of the basic stuffs. So I always had like the ability to build like a basic website. But what I'm getting at is I had enough skill set to know how sort of programming worked, and not programming, more of like web development, sort of like a passion or interest to learn to code. And back in 2012, the summer of 2012, I actually bought a book on Java, because I thought I should learn Java so that way I can build Android apps. And I bought the book and I never read it. It just sat there. And very similar to the book that I have propping up my laptop right now. So every single day, I would think about what I learned today, and I would try to write a short paragraph on what I learned. And that's what that blog is. So it's on Blogspot. It's Google's back to blogging platform. And I chose that blogging platform because I wanted to have a low bar of entry and barrier of entry to write a blog post. I don't want to build my own blog, because if I built my own blog, and I always recommend people not build their own blog when you want to learn how to code. And the reason for this is because you're going to spend way more time building the blog and never actually writing on the blog, which is it's a cool thing to learn. But if the goal is to write blog posts, you won't do it. So I always recommend people just use a platform. I use Blogspot. Today, I highly recommend use Dev2. I'm on Dev2 still, mainly because I'm transitioning my blog into a modern version. But to be quite honest, I haven't really got around to it. But I highly recommend it. If you're starting out today, if you're starting out brand new, just start doing a Dev2. And how has that helped my journey? Which, I'm trying to answer this question. I'm just like super long-winded. The way it's helped my journey is I've actually had a lot of people reach out to me directly because of the blog that I wrote. My first interview ever as for an engineering role was someone who reached out to me on Twitter because they read my blog. I would just write a short paragraph of what I learned, how I approached it, or what I was blocked on. It didn't even have to be like profound. Like a lot of times, just sort of like I was just stuck on something, didn't know how to do it, and Stack Overflow wasn't helping. So I just read a blog, and writing a blog sort of like set a platform for me to understand how to get out of the situation or how to share the question. If I had a link to a blog post that I could link to a Stack Overflow question, that actually got more traction and feedback, not only for my blog, but also for my answers that I was looking for. All my Stack Overflow points, they're all from this writing a blog post posted in Stack Overflow. So what I'm getting at is because I was doing this pattern of, as I was learning and as I had my first job, I kept this going. I would just get people reaching out to me and saying, hey, I read your blog on, some weird Ruby thing that you found. Would you like to meet my manager? We're actually hiring. There's a whole other story there that I'll share in the future, but I'm gonna move on to the next question. I'm already 12 minutes in. 12 minutes in? I'm gonna have to cut this down. What was the path leading to your position at GitHub? I actually shared that whole path in the previous video on this channel, so definitely check it out here. I'll probably I'll put a link on the video. I think probably here. I know how to do that. I've actually done this once before, but the video is how I got my job at GitHub. Watch that video and I'll answer the question. How did not having a computer science or programming related degree affect your career in computer science? I would not consider myself a computer scientist. I did do a lot of studying in algorithms. I've never got a job because of the studying I've done in algorithms, hands down. What I didn't mention in the actual video for the GitHub video and how I got my job at GitHub. Sorry, back when I was trying to level up, I was trying to move to like the senior level job role. So I had like normal job roles. I ended up taking like a junior job at Netlify, which I don't know if it actually was a junior job, to be quite honest. I was doing a lot of stuff. I was told through an organization called DevColor, we had these squads, and I met other people who were at Google and at Apple and Facebook, and they all had this same idea and mantra, is that you should always interview like every 2 years, or at least every year. Now, I got my first job in Florida, in Orlando, Florida. So the amount of CS grads who know Ruby on Rails in 2013 was actually rather low. Because when you go to school, you don't learn Ruby on Rails. You learn concepts, you learn how to like approach problems, and you sort of get like a breadth of experience. And so you might learn Java, you might learn Python, but you have like opportunity to sort of get a breadth of information. But what I did is actually I went super deep on Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So though a lot of the people who were graduating college had a breadth of experience, I had a deep experience on the one thing they needed at that job. I would say that you should definitely learn like the CS concepts and like Saran has a great course, which is Disco, where you can learn like things like machine learning. There's the Base CSS podcast. There's all these other free tools. Google has tons of great tools. Honestly, if you just apply for a Google job, I only know this because I've done this, they'll give you a whole list of CS concepts and things to study up on that you'll probably end up you would have learned in school, but they just give it to you as like sort of like, make sure you know all this stuff. There you go. So what I'm getting at is I was at a point where I was interviewing every 6 months for a job, and I actually studied up on the CS concepts, ended up not getting any of those jobs. I interviewed at Pinterest and interviewed at Square, interviewed at a couple other companies you probably never heard of, or maybe you have heard of, but I didn't get any of those jobs. But what it did help me do is when I ended up interviewing for GitHub. So GitHub doesn't have like a strong push for computer science engineering at the company in an interview process. It was more of like what I experienced in my first interview, which is, can you do a thing in a language? So because I spent all that time practicing for these harder interviews, when I got to the GitHub interview, I was able to get the problem done in like 15 minutes, which was like amazing. I also didn't mention this in the GitHub video. I didn't get the first interview. I actually bombed the first interview pretty bad. They gave me another chance, and then I'm not doing well in that time. So then they actually offered me a whole nother job, and that ended up getting me to the point where I'm a developer advocate as opposed to like a full senior engineer at the company, which has actually been really explosive for my career, because now not only have I been promoted twice at GitHub since I've been there in the last 2.5 years, I'm actually enjoying the role probably more than I would have if I was a full-time engineer. And that's because that's just my flavor and what I like to do. Yeah, CS degree, no problem. If you have a CS degree, if you're getting your CS degree, I think it's going to be beneficial. But I think if you have the combination of have a real deep knowledge on something and have your CS degree, I think you will have no issues within the industry. And I know there's a lot of people who push back, like, don't get a degree, it's not worth it, or just do a boot camp, or don't do a boot camp. I think all advice is bad. It depends on what works for you. So if you are 19 years old and you're thinking about going into college, or 18, I would say college is great, because when you're 18 and 19 years old, you probably should go to college to learn some of those basic life skills, and then you could take that and then go get your job. Now, if you're 27 like I was when I transitioned from sales to tech and engineering roles, like I didn't need another degree. I had a degree. I was actually getting my MBA at the time too as well. So like I didn't need one more degree just to prove I could write code and have a job full time. So instead I went the route of just learning and being very skilled in one segment. What inspired you to start streaming? What inspired me to start streaming? So I guess streamed on Jason Langsdorff, talked about GitHub Actions, saw how he did, and I was like, oh man, this is really cool. I think I should do this. So I did it starting in January of this year. And I didn't even know what was going to happen this year, but January came to February. I was doing like every other week I do like a stream and sort of try it out. And then at that point, February, I had my last trip planned. So I was like, I'm going to do this every week until my next trip. I was actually going to Australia in April of this year. Those who don't know, maybe you're watching this video years later, everything sort of shut down. There was no travel. My company basically canceled all in-person events because as my role where I involved traveling at least once a month, that would always break up my streaming schedule. Because I had the opportunity just to be consistent, I just became consistent. So every Friday I was streaming and doing something. And it got to the point where people started showing up and I started getting excited about the fact that I was able to write code and chat with people at the same time, and started getting in sort of like a deep rabbit hole of like figuring out how streaming works, how gaming streaming works. And yeah, so to answer your question, really, Jason Langsdorff, he inspired me by doing what he's doing over there. So if you aren't subscribed to his channel, definitely do that, and also subscribe to his Twitch as well. What made you start your side project open source? What I'll do, instead of answering this question, I'm going to link to a video that I gave at All Things Open that answers this entire question of why I built open source. So instead of answering that, I'm going to say check out that video. I'm going to keep I have a lot of links on how to keep it below. If there are too many links to add to below, what I'm going to do is probably just put them all in my repo, which is bdougie/AMA, and that'll be helpful. So check out that. I'll leave a link to the video, and I will probably put the video over here as B-roll too as well, so that way you can see and get an idea of what it is. Next question: how does plagiarism come into play when with school? So reminder, these are college students that I was talking to, so they're very on the nose about their personal experience. So plagiarism come into play with school in the work or in the workplace if nowadays everything is open sourced. And that's a really good question. Like, what's stopping you from copy and paste code directly from open source libraries? And that actually happens a lot. And the way you get around this is licensing. So there's a site called choosealicense.com. GitHub put that together, and you actually get an idea of like how licensing works. So the most liberal license right now is MIT. I think it's like probably like 60% of the open source projects that are licensed. MIT license, which basically just says you could use the code however you want. If you want to copy and paste it for your homework, go ahead. If you want to claim it and go get VC funding down in Sand Hill Road, go for it. Like, there's no limitations on that. The only limitation is that you cannot go back to me. If I license my stuff, MIT, come back to me and say this code hurt me in some way, or this code infected malware into my project. That's how you sort of get around it, is by actually having a license in your project. Now, if you're doing schoolwork, I think your professors are smart enough, they're all CS grads probably themselves, to know how to work around and find out plagiarisms. Don't do that. What should I do to get into open source? Lots of information, open source.guides. Open Source Friday is a thing I do every Friday. So I think you should just come to the Friday streams, Open Source Friday, learn from the maintainers how the projects work, learn what your interest is too as well. A lot of times, if you go to Kent C. Dodd, he has a how to get an open source video series on Egghead. Definitely check that out. There's plenty of things how to get in open source. Now, if you're looking for just interest, if you're really in the machine learning, find a community. Find a community that does machine learning and join it, and join the conversation. And I think if you're part of the conversation, you find a community, that's probably the easiest way. A lot of times people just try to build a project in silence and as a silo, and then try to have people sort of jump on and get excited about it. That's going to be challenging. And it's going to be challenging for the reason of people don't know who you are or don't know what you're doing. No one's going to just jump in there and be like, oh, you're doing amazing stuff. What I'm getting at is how you should get open source. Join a community, find a community, befriend, become friends. To be a friend, you got to be a friend. To make friends, you got to be a friend. Make friends, be friends. Be friends, make friends. I don't know what the saying is, But I think the easiest part is just go to those Discords. A lot of these projects have Discords. A lot of these projects have repos. I think the people interaction is probably more valuable than the code interaction, because what you're going to get out of that is you're going to get people that will be willing to mentor you and answer your questions if they know who you are. They won't answer your questions or mentor you if you have no idea who they are. How do you make it so other people can find your open source projects? And again, write a blog post, share the project, the existence of the project, tweet it out. Like, if you don't have a Twitter, get a Twitter. If you have a project that's working, you got to share it. Otherwise, people won't ever find it. I was gonna say bazillion. there is roughly high millions. I'm not sure what the actual repo number is, but there's a lot of projects on GitHub. So to be able to stand out, have a good README, make sure when people walk in there, they know how to contribute, they know how to use it. Just having a good guide around the project is always hands down going to be the best. Some of the best projects that sort of thrive aren't the best code. It happens to be the best documentation site or the best marketing site. It happens to always be something outside of just the code that brings people in. So keep that in mind. Did you ever feel you wanted to give up? And if so, how did it inspire you not to give up? And the answer really is, quick answer is yes. Yes, I've wanted to give up many times. And mainly in the beginning, right when I first had my first app I wanted to build. And I think the key really there is have an app, something you want to build as you're learning. It makes it so much easier. But I had the structure, I knew what I wanted to build, but I knew I couldn't get past a certain hurdle. Like, I could not understand how routing worked in Ruby on Rails. It just made no sense to me. And I struggled with it for like probably a couple weekends, and then I got to the point where I was just like, I want to learn how to code, but I don't know how to get past this part. And everything I'm looking up, I just don't know how to find the answer for. And like, for the majority of everything I did up until that point, I could just Google for the answer. I found it, it worked, I moved on. But for whatever reason, whenever I sort of broke out of the tutorials, and a lot of times you'll get in like this, as you learn, you'll get in a tutorial cycle where you just learn, but you don't do anything with it. I wanted to do something with it, and I got stuck. I Googled it. I Googled how to learn how to do Ruby on Rails, and I sort of stumbled onto this platform, this organization called Block. And Block itself was like, it wasn't a boot camp, because like at the time, boot camps was like a very new term. Like, Dev Boot Camp was the sort of model that was around for a year. And these folks were mentors from Dev Boot Camp, from their earliest cohort. And what I found was that they had a different approach, where you didn't just sit in class and have a cohort of 25 students and learn how to code, but actually paired you one-on-one with a mentor. And that was sort of like the aha moment. If I could sit and meet with a mentor, meet with someone else who's done this before, who's already in the industry, and sit with them, I can get unblocked. So the way I get unblocked is I find someone who knows more about it than I do. And I think with my position where I'm at now, like at GitHub, we have tons of engineers that are really good at what they do. I constantly ask them questions all the time. I send like Slack messages, and I jump into their channels and ask like really like open-ended questions. And the goal is really get unstuck, reach out to people, like join a community, just as I was saying with open source. So those are all the questions. I hope you enjoyed this this Q&A with me, I guess. If you have any questions, definitely leave a comment below in the description. Also check out my GitHub repo, bduggy/AMA, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask your own question. I think that's it. And I think what I'll do is I'll roll into an excerpt of that talk I was talking about earlier. So,
Gucci Mane? Anybody know Gucci Mane? He's a rapper. All right. And yeah, so he invented trap music. So the music that's like you can thank him for that. They also call it mumble rap too as well. But there's this quote that they took from an interview, which is, if you don't got sauce, then you lost. And it's talking about skill and like being a rapper and like how do you find that skill. And I find with open source, it's also the same. Like, if you don't know where to start, or you just didn't like, you weren't just born into some sort of situation that you just had open source like thrown at you, then you just don't know.